Hello everyone, and welcome to our second lunation video and our first full moon video. I have to say, it has been extremely enjoyable putting all of this information together, and what luck that this particular full moon is going to be on a lunar eclipse. So we get to talk about that as well. The point of these videos is to provide some basic information concerning the full moon according to astrology and the tarot. Both systems are fundamental to divination and psycho-spiritual information that can help us all reach our higher self and act more in our best interest. As mentioned, this full moon will be in an eclipse, and it's also going to be in Sagittarius, where we were still in the solar energy of Gemini. If you remember from our last lunation video, Gemini being an air sign, the element of air is important to cooling down the element of fire, which is the elemental correspondence to Sagittarius. However, we also know that Sagittarius is an independent type of energy, and once you add the mercurial nature of Gemini, some interesting things can definitely happen. There are several sources we can use to help us wade through and understand better how this energy will most likely affect us on the microsphere and the macrospheric levels. We need to first understand exactly what is Sagittarius energy, particularly when it comes to the moon, and what other astrological influences are present. We mentioned an eclipse earlier, so what else could there possibly be going on for this specific moon? And then, of course, my favorite, how can the tarot be used as a tool to bring about some clarity for this period? So, Sagittarius is known as one of the three fire signs, the other two being Aries and Leo. Fire being the element associated with desire and energy. I personally consider the idea of personal drive being associated with fire, specifically when it comes to personal goals or career milestones or anything like that. The symbol is kind of an arrow, which alludes to correspondences in Greek and Roman mythology. You think of Artemis, Diana, Apollo, her brother, Diana being the moon, Apollo being the sun. So I think that's kind of appropriate in certain instances. Sagittarius is essentially a hunting sign, and Diana, as the celestial archer with the bow and arrow, is also included. Diana being more associated with the moon, that will be the energy that we're more concerned and will focus on at this time. However, it is still important to know a little bit about some of the general traits normally associated with the solar energy. A person who is a Sagittarius, their most likable trait will be their optimism. Its ruling planet is Jupiter, the planet of fortune. In Sagittarius, the enthusiasm of fire, the restless, mutable quality, and the jovial influence of Jupiter combine to produce an expansive personality who cannot be confined. So what does it mean if you're moon in Sagittarius? Well, on one side, on the bright side, you are more adventurous, you're optimistic, exuberant, open-minded, and even sincere. On the adverse side of things, because with yin and yang, light and dark, you can have a tendency to be more reckless, a little extravagant, irresponsible, careless, and even uncommitted. So the big takeaway is that Sagittarius energy is, like I said before, very independent energy. Pardon me, it is introspective and definitely a bit of a self-centered type of energy. It's very introverted in a sense, for self-speculation, self-serving in a lot of ways, which, being a fire sign myself, I can totally relate to that kind of idea. But again, being that we are now in Gemini time of the year, we are definitely going to have to be aware of how the world is affecting us on the personal level, particularly when it comes to how we interact with others around us, air being that communication element. And as mentioned before, the moon energy of Diana is what we are more concerned with now. It's finding a balance between the light and the dark side and how to keep that arrow of Sagittarius on target moving forward. So of course, there are some, as mentioned earlier, there are other astrological influences happening. There is the eclipse. So how does that affect us? There are also several retrogrades going on right now. If you've been paying attention, you know it's just very much retrograde season going on. But which one or ones have the greater impact? First, for viewers who are new to astrology and terms like retrograde, some definitions are in order. So a retrograde is the apparent backward motion of a planet traveling through the zodiac. The sun and the moon it's important to note that those are never in retrograde. In reality, planets in our solar system do not move backward in their orbits. They only seem to do so because of the angle of observation here on Earth. Retrograde motion is an illusion, similar to looking through the window of a moving train at a second train that is traveling alongside it but moving more slowly. The slower moving train will seem to be traveling backward, although in fact it is traveling forward. In classical astrology, a retrograde planet was considered weak and having a negative influence. Modern astrologers consider retrograde planets in a chart to be a positive, but also having an influence that does not manifest itself until later in life. Current retrogrades going on right now involve the following planets: Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. Since Jupiter is the ruling planet of Sagittarius, I would caution making any huge decisions, at least when it comes to money. Right now, it's better to take time to save up your resources, because you don't have. I mean, let's be honest, you don't have to be an astrologer right now to know that things are in an upheaval. All you have to do is just turn on the news, right? So, yeah. Anyway, Venus is another retrograde that we should probably be taking into account, but I'll talk about that more later. The way that I personally view retrogrades, I think of, like in the tarot, when you get reversals, or if you're like me and you don't really do reversals, you think of dignity, so ill-dignity, ill-dignified. We don't always look forward to them, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad or even negative. Some people see reversals as a blockage of energy, and I kind of like that. Whenever I accidentally shuffle my deck and a card accidentally becomes reversed, that's kind of how I view it, as a blockage of energy at that point in time. But dignity, ill-dignity is not... It's a time for growth. It's a time for change. It's a time to, like, okay, it's trying to get my attention. This is a matter that needs to be brought forth, and it needs to be dealt with. So that's kind of how I think of a retrograde in a way. It's a really good time to do some self-inspection and really kind of grapple with some issues that may arise during this time. Particularly during this period, it's kind of this period is going to be a trial by fire. And your motives and your decisions that you make now, I think that's going to be a very important thing to always be paying attention to during this particular time of the year. So eclipses. The eclipse is another major factor. Not only will it make the moon a pretty red color tonight, which is appropriate because it's the strawberry moon, which basically just means it's strawberry season. Whoop-de-doo. Unless you're really into making strawberry pies and stuff, I guess. I don't know. But it will also affect your personal natal charts. Eclipses are dynamic cosmic occurrences that activate the lunar nodes. Simply put, the moon glides across an elliptical that is constantly rotating around the zodiac. The highest and lowest points of this orbit correspond with the lunar nodes, which appear in our birth charts as the south and north nodes. And in this particular eclipse, the nodes are changing, they're flipping. And so that whenever something changes, if you remember 2012, whenever the poles shifted, the electromagnetic poles shifted, that's when things... Anytime you get a big change going on, there's going to be upheaval, there's going to be some trials. So, for those of you who may not know what nodes are, well, they are 2 points, north and south, where the orbit of the moon or any of the planets intersect the ecliptic, the path of the sun. Nodes usually refer to the moon's nodes called lunar nodes. Classical astrology, the north node, called the ascending node, was known as the caput draconis, meaning the dragon's head, and the south node, called the descending node, was known as the cauda draconis, meaning dragon's tail. This referred to the imagery of a celestial dragon swallowing the moon during its eclipses. In a birth chart, lunar nodes mark sensitive points, but there is much discussion currently among astrologers as to their exact meaning. Generally, the north node is thought to indicate areas of benefits and honors, and the south node areas of strain and adversity. Some modern astrologers feel the moon's nodes pertain to relationships, north node to forming ties, south node to dissolving them. And like I said, there's going to be that shift going on. The north node is switching over to the south. So there you have it right there. And particularly, like I said, in my last video, Gemini is that air. It's that mercurial time with relationships, and even within yourself. So just be prepared, and watch out, whenever you interact with people on social media or face to face. There's just, this is the prime time for arguments, for fights. Just be, always question your motives. Always ask yourself, is this worth the energy? Does this serve my highest good? So it should be obvious that this eclipse will affect us on a very personal level. If you don't have a copy of your birth chart, I suggest going to astro.com and you can type in your information and they'll give you a birth chart. And what's really cool about that, what it allows you to is it allows you to also check your personal horoscope every single day, and it takes into effect your entire natal chart, not just your solar sign. So that's pretty cool. So spend some time with your natal chart. Also, if you are a tarot reader or if you dabble, tarot is a great way, I have found personally, in my own personal practice, as a way to, as kind of like a universal translator for astrology. And speaking of tarot, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the correspondences with the tarot and Sagittarius. So, the tarot trump card is going to be Temperance. The magical title of this card is the Daughter of the Reconcilers, the bringer forth of life. It is the beauty of a firm basis, the sovereignty of fundamental power, soul acting through Sagittarius upon Luna. This path has been called the dark night of the soul, and for good reason. It is a most difficult and trying path that leads from the core of the lower self to the center of the higher self on the middle pillar. Another of its titles is Volcan, which means trial by fire. And for those of you that don't know, in the Kabbalistic tree of life, you have 3 pillars. You have the pillar on the left, which is the pillar of severity, pillar on the right, pillar of pillar of mercy, and then the middle pillar is the pillar of mildness. And our goal is to always be on that middle pillar. So, just a little bit of reference for you. And then, I love trial by fire. This is definitely what I've been alluding to. Trial by fire is what this period is. So Temperance is often called the angel card. And even if you look at this picture here, she even looks a little bit like an angel there. And look, you have the Sagittarius arrow here, and you have the Sagittarius arrow here. It's pointing up to your higher self, for your highest good. So, kind of cool. Anyway, so the Deaconess. Let's talk about that now. So if those of you who don't know, the Deaconess, if you divide the astrological chart in such a way, each deaconate takes about 30 degrees of the chart. And in this particular time, the deaconates are actually still in Gemini, and we're in the second deaconate. And remember, we talked about that very briefly in the last. So the Nine of Swords, that's where we're at right now when it comes to the deaconates, because we're in the second one for Gemini. A little more about this in a little bit. The second deaconate for Gemini is harmonious Venus combined with Gemini's Mercury to give you a deft social touch, People respond to your warm and effusive nature, and at times you can be argumentative because you are so fond of your own ideas. So this is definitely that Sagittarius energy, fire energy, mixing with the mercurial air of Gemini. And that really comes forth, I think, with the Nine of Swords. But remember when I said earlier that the Venus retrograde was another retrograde that we needed to take into account? Well, this is why. So like in the tarot, if a retrograde is simply a reversal or blockage of energy, it would seem that we will have trouble connecting to those around us. Venus representing the feelings, emotions, and empathy, the Suit of Cups. Watch out for those interactions and others and with your own self as well. And so back to the Nine of Swords. The Nine of Swords is generally, the meaning of it is cruelty, despair, masochism, and slander. But also sometimes obedience, faithfulness, patience, unselfishness, all according to its dignity, or if it's reversed or not. In this case, I generally think it's more of the ill-dignified sense of the word, just based upon everything else that's going on with Venus in retrograde and Jupiter in retrograde. But ultimately, that's kind of up to your own interpretation and how that's going to be affecting you. So, and of course, we can't talk about the tarot without making a quick reference to the Hebrew correspondence, the Hebrew letter of Samek, the 15th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, meaning prop. In biblical times, the tent peg or prop was the most important and potent symbol because it was an absolute indispensable tool for the proper erection of the tent. Not only did it ensure the tent would rise toward heaven, but it also and simultaneously secured it to the earth. So, wrong card. So here, on this card here, we have Smech right here. And we have the prop, the arrow, again, pointing up towards heaven, towards your higher self. Just for those of you who are interested, it's also denotes the path on the Kabbalistic tree of life, connecting Isod with Tiferet. So to help kind of navigate and translate all of this and how it might affect you personally, there's a tarot spread that I use for myself and also for my clients. And to kind of, particularly, for a full moon in Sagittarius specifically. And I think it can really help provide guidance and to make sure that your compass, that your guardian angel is pointing straight and true towards your highest good. So the first card will be placed here, and it is what deserves more of my compassion. The second card will be placed right here. What part of myself needs to expand? And then card 3, where should I direct my energy? Card 4, what is my true purpose of this cycle? And I will definitely be sure to post that spread in the description below. So, in conclusion, as you can see, this full moon is pretty significant at this specific time in our lives and in this part of the year. Multiple forces are moving, and some important ones aren't. That's Jupiter and Venus in the retrograde. I would definitely caution on making any major decisions during this time, particularly as we begin moving out of the Venus retrograde and into Mercury retrograde. My advice is to always pay attention to your personal transits and use tarot in communication with your guardian angel, Temperance, during this time to help you stay on the correct path for your highest good. Well, guys, that's all I've got. Thank you for tuning in. There was definitely a lot of information here, so thank you for listening to me ramble. As always, if you haven't already, leave this video a like. Please subscribe because it really helps me out. Also, the materials that I consulted for this video will be listed in the description box below, with links on how you can purchase a copy for yourself. Now is a really great time to begin learning and consulting all about the different energies that are moving and how you fit amongst all of them. All right, well, hashtag Black Lives Matter, and I'll see you next time. Boop.